Some might say DraftKings is the Wild West of NFL Best Ball tournaments. So, how do you handle these crazy draft rooms, the unpredictability of a DraftKings draft? How do you handle the different ADP, the different scoring, some different players you might want to target on DraftKings, as well as some different draft strategies that we can employ across all the different tournaments on DraftKings? That's what we're going to get into today here, Monday Night Best Ball on Spike Week. Erik Beimfohr and Rob Coakley. Let's do it. So, Rob, we've been doing a lot of DraftKings drafts intentionally. I think they're a lot of fun. I think it's maybe an underserved area of the NFL Best Ball market, but we haven't really dug into had a show where we're like, okay, we're drafting on DraftKings. Everybody complains about how chaotic it is and how different it is,
Yes.
but nobody ever strategizes around how the heck do we handle these crazy DraftKings rooms. So I figure today we talk a little bit of DK strategy and then try to see what we can do, see how we can employ it in the draft.
Yeah, I actually did a DK draft yesterday, and it wasn't overly chaotic, and I was so sad. We have Felix in the chat. I saw him post that he got Jamar Chase 50th overall the other day or something like that. No, I think it was 5th overall, but it's just like, man, how am I not getting those draft rooms right now? But you will get them. If you draft enough on DK, you will get some of these draft rooms that are just absolute chaos, and it's amazing.
Shout out everyone in the chat. Shout out Stephanie. Hello. Olaf, Felix, Benjamin. Thank you guys for joining us. I do think that's where we should start, though, with kind of the chaos that can be a DraftKings draft. People probably want to hear which players should I, and we'll talk about some of the players maybe that are a little bit better on DraftKings and some different things we can do strategy wise. Obviously, we'll talk about the 20 rounds. I think it's maybe an underutilized thing in terms of how we leverage the fact that we have 2 extra picks. I think, I said, we'll get to that, but the 100%, all that stuff is good and well, and needs to be discussed. But at the end of the day, you can have these plans, you can have these players you want to target, you can have these strategies you want to employ. And it's not that being flexible and being kind of a good drafter and adaptable to your draft room isn't important on the other sites. Of course it is. But generally speaking, underdog goes somewhat according to plan, right? You just don't get guys that go in the 7th round, go in the 2nd round, really, on underdog. You don't get guys falling 6 rounds. You don't get some of that. You don't get the insane quarterback runs quite as much on underdog. So you have to, first and foremost, to me, on DraftKings, and there's not a really awesome way to learn how to do this other than draft and practice. You have to figure out there can never be panic. There can never be, oh my God, everybody has taken all these quarterbacks. I have no way to get a stack. I have no way to even get quarterbacks that I like and just, punt that team off. You always have to be adapting and kind of on it, really, in a DraftKings draft, which sounds funny because people will say oh, the drafts are so soft, everybody is so bad there. And while that is true, the chaos can lead you to not always taking advantage of the big perk of drafting on DraftKings, right? Go where the fish are. Easiest way to win money is to play against the worst competition. And if we all believe that that's on DraftKings, then we have to use that to our advantage. And when you get in a draft and you can joke about, oh, all the quarterbacks are going too high, and oh, look at these idiots reaching for these picks and reaching for these stacks, and then you get to the end and your team sucks too because you didn't take advantage of the fact that these people are doing maybe some suboptimal things. What did you do? You aren't any better than any other team that you think is poor on DraftKings. And so I'm curious how you have experienced that and kind of how you've dealt with that so far this year in 2023 on DraftKings.
So, I mean, we obviously see the weird drops of players and all that stuff, and that's just par for the course with DK. What I notice on DK a little bit more than underdog, and it does happen on underdog quite a bit as well, but this is usually 3 or 4 or 5 teams in a draft on DK, they'll start building a specific type of what we would consider a certain type of strategy, right? Maybe it's robust RB, and they take 3 or 4 running backs super early, and they should relatively be done or just be tacking on at the end or something like that. And they're still grabbing 1 or 2 more running backs in the 7th through 10th rounds, just like annihilating their team, right? So it's they're getting, we'll say they get CMC, Pollard, Derrick Henry, insert fourth Aaron Jones or something like that. And then they're still over here drafting guys that are in the 7th or 8th round. They're grabbing Zach Charbonnet. It's like, why? Why are you grabbing Zach Charbonnet on this team? So not just the player drops, what we need to be cognizant of is very much sticking to building our teams the way we're supposed to be building them, not letting some of those player drops screw up your structure of your team because everyone else is messing up their team structures, right? So yeah, if a player drops 15 rounds past ADP, great, he fixed your structure, perfect. But if you're doing like a robust RB draft, we'll just say, and I don't know, Aaron Jones would have been your 5th running back and he drops 15 places past ADP, does he really help your team out? Is that something that's going to actually help benefit your current construction, or do you need to hit wide receiver? Is Chris Godwin better as your 2nd or 3rd wide receiver, or are you going to be stuck with I like Jalen Hyatt? Are we going to start looking at Jalen Hyatt as your 4th wide receiver off the board, and your team? I mean, you're looking at volume and stuff, but your team feels a lot more dead when you could have just substituted, taken that big faller in Aaron Jones. ADP is not everything, right? It's just not. Me and you talk about this off stream all the time. I think this is the biggest conversation me and you have, is how ADP is just not everything. Like, yeah, you want to get guys that fall. Who doesn't? But it shouldn't affect the construction of your team if it's going to affect your team construction negatively, right?
Right. So, the ADP value is an important element to, drafting in your portfolio, of course. But the first and foremost thing is to create a good team, a good, well-structured team. It doesn't trump all of those other things. And I think we do see that. That's the trap, I think, that is easiest to fall into on DraftKings. And I don't necessarily mean a trap, but you'll run into, like you said, a room like that. Maybe all the running backs get scooped up really fast. Or, the quarterback thing is the easiest one to, what everybody probably experiences that the most. But you will have falling players because let's say you're in a room where everybody's scooping up all these quarterbacks, right? We know the early guys are going to go, but then Watson and Richardson and Dak and all these guys keep getting pulled up because these guys it's a really quarterback thirsty room. Mm-hmm. And you say, well, I'm not going to do that. I'll wait, right? I'll wait. And that's fine. Aaron Jones falls and Mike Evans falls and Brandon Cooks falls, and you just keep scooping up this value, right? And then you get to the 13th round, you don't have a quarterback. Every quarterback has been taken. You have, now that ADP value that you got, you're going to have to give back in order to reach for a quarterback to make a team that's like not stone dead the moment the draft is over, right? So now you got to reach multiple rounds, and that is okay. A reach later in the draft is certainly better than a reach earlier in the draft. But now you also may not be getting the stacks that you want. You may not be getting, certain positional allocations that you want because you just kept scooping value all along the way. And you will get value in DraftKings drafts. Like, it's going to happen. But as you said, ADP value is not everything. ADP value is one thing that goes into account on is this team good or not. And it's important to understand the why behind, like, why does ADP value matter? Right? It's not just like, oh, I got ADP value, so it's good. The ADP value thing is allowing you to get a better projected and typically higher upside, higher point scoring player later in the draft. And that, so you're getting a guy in the 7th round that usually goes in the 4th or 5th. So you have a higher projected player, right? Generally speaking, the 4th round player projects for more points. And so you're getting a better, projected team and a higher upside team there. also you're getting this level of kind of uniqueness, right? We talk about uniqueness all the time, and people try to force it. Like, how do I get uniqueness? It's like, well, part of ADP value, like probably one of the two main reasons why ADP value matters, is you're getting this player that everyone else takes in the middle of the fifth, and you're getting him at the beginning of the seventh. And so you're not only are you getting this better player later, you're getting this combination that doesn't exist, right? Because you now have multiple fifth round players on your team, or multiple sixth round players, or multiple eighth round players. And so you're getting this unique combination of players. But like if you get that and then you don't have, right, enough quarterback firepower, you don't have, so now you got naked Mac Jones, right? Because you had to reach for him because there was no, you built out tight ends already, right? You took early tight ends because they kept falling. TJ Hawkinson fell. Oh, look at this. I got 12 picks of value on TJ Hawkinson. Greg Dulcich falls. Oh, got great value on Greg Dulcich. You get to the end, you don't have any quarterbacks. You built an uncorrelated late round quarterback team. Like, are you really going to beat a million other teams in the DraftKings? Literally a million other teams in the DraftKings Million Maker with Brock Purdy, unstacked Brock Purdy and Mac Jones and, Brian Tannehill. Like, no, your team isn't really any better than the ones that reach. So it's always this delicate balance of, I still got to make a good team, even though my other the people that I'm drafting against are maybe not drafting how I think is optimal. I still have to be able to manipulate it. And I think ADP value is the one trap that's easiest to fall into. And it hits you once that, we talk about wide receiver avalanches on Underdog. Once like that ADP value avalanche, you just keep scooping it up, right? You're skiing out in front of this avalanche of all this ADP value. Well, once it stops and you look at your team, exactly. You get naked Mac Jones, shout out Al. It's time to just draft again. But like once it slaps you in the face, once it's over, you're like, look at all these ADP values. And then you get to the 14th, 15th round. You're like, man, I have a lot of great ADP values, but my team is really shitty because I don't have a stack. I don't have anything. I just kept scooping ADP values. And so there is a certain point of almost diminishing returns to ADP value if that's all you're doing throughout the entire draft. And so that's just important to it's a structure and draft strategy and portfolio thing, right? Like there's all these different things that play into it. But we always like, it's like almost like human psychological. You see this ADP value, you just scoop it. You don't even think, but it's not always that straightforward.
Well, my favorite one is when it's like, just say it's Kyle Pitts and someone's like, I never really draft Kyle Pitts. He usually goes 66 overall, but I was able to get him 68th. So just getting that value on him makes him a great pick. And I just like envision myself choking that person to death slowly as I whisper the name Kyle Pitts into their ear repeatedly. But it's just, I think sometimes we get a little too out of control with the ADP thing. The other thing I'll bring up for DraftKings specifically, and I'm still kind of working my theory and looking into it a little bit more. I brought it up on the show yesterday. I'm looking at specifically to start quarterbacks, but I want to dive into running backs, wide receivers on DraftKings as well. And what is the value of the bonus points for these players on DraftKings relative to the other sites, right? Because you dive into these numbers, and you look at Patrick Mahomes last year, right? He hit the bonus 10 times. The next guy that hit it, it was like a 3-way tie for 5. So we're talking about a 15-point difference in just like passing yards. Some of the guys picked up ground on him, literally running the football. Your Jalen Hurts, your Josh Allen and stuff like that. But not only just for like the season long stuff where they're getting bonus points, but like, let's take week 17 into consideration. Let's take week 15 and 16 into consideration. When Mahomes is doing something at a 3-1, and I know I keep turning shit into Patrick Mahomes, but when he's doing something at a 3-1 or 2-1 clip over the rest of the field, like that's 3 points. Not only is that 3 points, that is also 300 passing yards, which usually turns into touchdowns as well. Like, is their value just way higher on DraftKings in terms of what they produce? Now, I know you got to correlate that versus the running back yardage and the wide receiver yardage for bonus points and stuff like that too. But that's what I've started diving into. I have no working theory on it yet, but I think it's something to actually like dive into and try to understand, are second round quarterbacks more valuable on DraftKings, or are they less valuable because of the guys around them getting you the bonus points on a more frequent basis, right? It could be the opposite. It could mean that maybe they're more valuable on underdog. And I'm just trying to work through that and figure out some sort of system to figure that out, right?
Yeah, I think it's probably one of the tougher questions, because if we talk about underdog versus DraftKings, so obviously half point PPR versus full PPR, but as you mentioned, the bonuses as well, right? 300-yard passing bonus, 100-yard rushing, and 100-yard receiving are all 3 points. But like, what does that mean? Like you said, from a stacking and a correlation perspective, is actually kind of a tricky thing to figure out. On underdog, you don't have any of that, right? And so like even the like passing volume stuff is nice to get those extra yards and those extra catches for just using the Mahomes thing, right? Mahomes and Kelsey, when Patrick Mahomes throws for 300 something yards and they throw it 45 times, when Kelsey has a 25 to 30% target share, right? He's going to rack up a bunch of catches and probably a bunch of yards. And then he's going to, be the best bet to score a touchdown. But without all those other points, it's harder, in my opinion, for Travis Kelsey to separate without random touchdown variance. And now he's the best bet, 100%. He's the best bet to be the guy that scores multiple touchdowns in a game. But even like 8 for 100 and a touchdown is a monster game, right? For a tight end, absolutely monster. But we're talking about 20 points. And now no one is scoffing at 20 points at the tight end position. Trust me. But like when you think about it, it isn't something that is insurmountable, just specifically in a vacuum at the tight end position, right? Because touchdowns make up such a higher percentage of the scores on underdog that I think that this is my working theory, that something like a Mahomes Kelsey stack has a little bit more value on DraftKings, because when they both hit those spikes together, you get so many added extra points to both players from all the catches. So obviously every catch is getting a half point more, and then they're both right spiking at the same time. And so even if you only get that one touchdown from Kelsey, Mahomes got 3 extra points because of the 300-yard bonus. Kelsey got 3 extra points because of the 100-yard receiving bonus, and he got 4 extra points because of the PPR, right? And so that's a lot of extra points between those two guys. Versus on underdog, Mahomes throws, let's say he only throws for 3 and one of them go to Kelsey, and Tyler Higbee goes for 70 yards and a touchdown. It's like, you just start running
30
down
and 2. Like,
yeah, exactly. You just start running down these things and you're like, I kind of think that these premium stacks on DraftKings make a little bit more sense, because when it's racking up volume, that's how they can separate on DraftKings more. Like, racking up volume is great on underdog. Of course, we want it. I want my quarterback to throw for 300 yards. I want him to throw a bunch to the one player. But if the touchdowns don't go to that guy, look at all the nuclear weeks that have happened that have won people tournaments. Of course, they win you tournaments on DraftKings too, but it's massive touchdown games. Jamar Chase 4 or 5 touchdowns or whatever. Mike Evans 4 touchdowns. Alvin Kamara like 17 touchdowns, right? Like, these games are all touchdowns separating people, and you separate so far on underdog when you have those. Versus, dude, if you catch 15 passes, I know it's a made up random huge number, you catch 15 passes for 150 yards, even without a touchdown, that is a shitload of fantasy. That is a lot of fantasy points on DraftKings. On underdog, it's like not quite as much, because everything is so touchdown driven. And so when I'm thinking through those correlations, I'm thinking about like, when you're right, we're drafting like we're right, and we're hoping to get really lucky. When we get lucky, I think on DraftKings, that lucky Mahomes Kelsey game is like unfadable in the final round of a tournament. in the first and second round on underdog, that Mahomes Kelsey game, maybe it's unfadeable, but I don't know, man. I'm not so convinced. Like, of course, if he catches 4 touchdowns, yeah, but like that 8 for 120 in 2 game when Mahomes throws for 400 yards it can be a huge differentiator on DraftKings, whereas I don't think it sets you apart quite as much on underdog.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm working through. And Hacker brings up the next point that I was going to actually say, where he says that it's easier to catch up on receiver on DK, which is so true because if they get the 3 bonus points, so if your wide receiver gets 3 bonus points, but mine gets an extra catch for 20 more yards, we're even, right? Like it's just so easy to do that. But if Mahomes throws 4 touchdowns for 300 yards, he actually almost threw for 5 touchdowns because you get that 3 bonus points, which is essentially another quarterback touchdown. And to your point, the tight end premium, who's actually capable of getting these 100-yard games, it's Kelsey and a handful of guys like on a consistent basis. And if they're doing it over the course of a season, I was kind of out on Kelsey. And the more we talk about this, I actually might move him up on DK. He might become a very premium DK guy for me. And to get that stack more often, even though it's getting selected a lot, it's to your point. If that goes off in the playoffs and you don't have it, it's going to be tough to come back from that just based on if both of them bonus in one weekend. And I don't think anyone ever talks about this. Like, and it's just like, it's such a differentiator. We're talking 6 expected points on top for them both bonusing, plus the touchdown upside, the yardage upside. It's almost a hole you can't come out of, right? Like if that happens. And do you think they're capable of doing it between weeks 15, 16, or 17? Probably. If he did it 10 times, well, not the stack, but if Mahomes did it 10 times last year, reason believes to tell you that he's probably going to do it once or twice in those 2 weeks. So
it could be 3 times, and it could happen every single week.
And it could happen every single week. And it's not just Mahomes, right? The Mahomes Kelsey stack works out nicely, but it's Josh Allen rushing, even though we think he's going to lower his rushing this season. It's Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts getting a couple 100-yard rushing games. Lamar Jackson getting a couple 100-yard rushing games, right? Justin Fields, it'd be interesting to look at his numbers on DK last year, just based on his rushing upside and the bonus points he was getting on DK. I guarantee like made him much more of a smash on DraftKings than it did any other site. I mean, it's impossible that it didn't. So I don't think he's going to do quite what he did last year, but even if he lowers that by 20%, he's still crushing the field and rushing this year. So these are the things we need to be like thinking about as we draft DraftKings stuff. I think personally, I'm not saying it's the end all be all, but it might bump me up to just taking more of the premium quarterbacks over a large sample.
And I've been largely fading the premium quarterbacks on under. So as we talk this through, I almost feel like my preferred strategy on both sites is almost the opposite. Because so when we go back to the thing we talked about at the very beginning, where drafts are very chaotic, you're probably going to get multiple spots where you get ADP value. We also think that the ADP is softer, as what Hacker mentioned. You can catch up at receiver on DraftKings. Plus, the full PPR scoring just helps wide receivers in general. So wide receivers are cheaper, and they're not going as hot, right? They're cheaper in terms of they will fall, and they're cheaper in terms of like a lot of these guys that are going in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round on underdog are not going in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round on DraftKings. So you can catch up at wide receiver. Running backs are already devalued a little bit. Not necessarily devalued. The really, really good ones that do catch passes are not devalued. But the running, right, like I love Damian Harris. He's not quite as fun of a DraftKings click as he is on underdog.
Sure.
But we can take this idea that we know the ADP is softer. So the whole premise of one of the reasons why we all love DraftKings is, again, go to where the fish are, go to where the competition is the worst. So, and part of that is people are bad drafters, but the ADP is softer, etc. So we need to use that. So why don't we use that to our advantage, but like plan in knowing I'm going to use that? we talked about the ADP value thing and how easy it is to just keep scooping all this ADP value. Well, what kind of team benefits from being able to just scoop all this ADP value? It's probably one with one of those top 5, 6, 7, 8 quarterbacks, right?
Mhm.
Because you're going to need to catch up at wide receiver. You take an elite, right? You take Patrick Mahomes in the second or third round. You got to catch up. Especially you take Travis Kelce and Patrick Mahomes. You definitely got to have to be catching up at wide receiver, at running back. Well, if we know that drafters are probably going to help us with that, our opponents are going to help us catch up because their ADP is bad and they let some guys fall that maybe they shouldn't. I can pre-plan for that and say, maybe I'm going to dip into some of these elite quarterbacks a little bit more because I know the room's going to give me guys that I like in the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th rounds versus underdog. As much as I love wide receivers, when I not even just Mahomes and Kelce, when I take one of them, you get to the 5th, 6th round, and I'm like, my God, I'm drafting a 0 running back team, and these wide receivers suck. I don't even like them. They're not even very good. And so how do I kind of pivot that way on underdog is I am taking a lot more riskier quarterback approach. Taking 2 middle to late round guys or just punting it off with 3 late round guys that are like we talked about Mac Jones. I have a ton of Mac Jones. I have a ton of Sam Howell. I'll take Kenny Pickett and all these guys on underdog because I know the room is not going to give me the opportunity to make up ground when I take detours away from wide receiver or even sometimes running back on underdog. On DraftKings, they're going to give me that. And we just made the case that you want to show up to the gunfight in week 17. Like, I feel like Mahomes Kelce is probably as a bazooka that I get to show up with at those 2 positions. And the room is going to give me a wide receiver group that I don't dislike, So how do we take advantage of DraftKings? I'm not saying I'm going to draft 150 elite quarterback teams. We want to have a port. Hey, yeah, just Rob will 150 Patrick Mahomes teams. But I do think that it's sticker shock at first on DraftKings. Like, oh my God, I'm going to take these quarterbacks at these prices. But I think it actually, in a weird way, kind of makes sense to lean into that a little bit more than it does on underdog. And again, the Mac Jones and such of the world, without bonuses, without all that, can make Mac Jones and Hunter Henry can make it a lot closer with Mahomes and Travis Kelce on underdog than you probably think that they can. Right. And but on DraftKings, like obviously Mac doesn't run. Mahomes runs enough to be dangerous. But like Hurts, Fields, Lamar, Josh Allen, we know what these guys can do with their legs. Mac just can't. There is no feasible way that he can make up that ground, right? And Hunter Henry, God bless him, I love him. He's not catching 10 passes. It's just not happening. So like, I feel like we can find some value just by acknowledging the fact that quarterback and tight end maybe can give us a little more juice, and the room will allow us to do it on DraftKings.
And just to go on to your Mac Jones point, take a guy that I like even better than Mac Jones, who's going a little higher, obviously, but I like Geno Smith a lot. Doesn't he feel like he's a much better underdog play? Because how many times is he going to throw for 300 yards this season? Probably not a ton, right? So I think it just kind of shows the point
and he's never running for 100, right? I really like Geno.
I like Geno a lot this year too.
This year, I really like the Seattle stacks.
Mm-hmm.
Also, like Steelers and Seahawks are just like always available to you in a draft if you ever want, you're siding with week 17. But I'm just looking really quickly. Geno had 400 yard or 4 300-yard games all of last season, and his highest rushing output was actually in week 17, 51 yards. So you're never getting the rushing bonus, and he's not an awesome bet. Now they have JSN now, so maybe the offense is just awesome, and that does come up, and that's why he's appealing. That's why we do like him at his draft cost. But like you said, if he only throws for 300 yards a couple times, he banks that 3 or 4 touchdown game in the playoffs. You want him, you need him. You know what I mean? Versus on underdog or versus on DraftKings. Right, Fields and Hurts and Allen and Lamar, they can double bonus These guys
Yeah.
can throw for 300 and run for 100. Geno rarely is going to do either. And that's a guy we like. Now take into account the guys maybe we don't like, right? Like I actually kind of like Kenny Pickett too. That's a week 17 game. I actually kind of like a little potential, second year breakout from Kenny Pickett. I like their weapons, etc. But like Kenny Pickett's never running for 100 yards. And is Kenny Pickett ever going to throw for 300? Not very often. And so it's just so hard for them to keep pace. But I think the sticker shock of those early quarterbacks for most like serious drafters, right? The casuals just show up there like, fuck yeah, dude, give me Patrick Mahomes. Like, that's awesome. The serious drafter is like, oh my God, Patrick Mahomes over Tony Pollard or whatever. That seems absurd. But I'm not sold that it is absurd, really.
It might be the meme that Davis Maddock always shares, right? Where it's the Neanderthal that's like saying something, then the smart guy in the middle, and then like the super smart guy saying the same thing as Neanderthal. So it might be that situation with these elite quarterbacks on DK. Speaking of which, are we going to jump into a DK draft?
Let's do it. Let's see what we can do with some of these strategies. I know Hacker answered the question, but just so everybody can see, Ann's Comedy asked, is the best ball scoring the same as the DFS scoring? And yes, it is exact same. If you played DFS on DraftKings before, exact same scoring.
Yeah, it is the same. So we are jumped into this draft. This is the one thing that has to go. Jesus Christ, we can never get an early pick on these things ever. just for anything, right? We're drafting at the let's see, the 11 spot again. Oh my God. It's like our destiny at Spike Week to just get the 11 spot on everything. It feels like it's so sad. I hate it so much.
How have you felt about we talked about the wide receiver thing and it being a little softer? How have you felt about some of the earlier running backs that like it's funny because again, full PPR versus half PPR and underdog, but I find myself again really hating my wide receivers when I dip too heavily into some of these early round running backs, which I like. We all like. I love Tony Pollard. Nick Chubb is a guy I really like. Who has anything negative to say about Saquon, especially in full PPR, etc. But like on underdog, especially if I take two, like my God, your wide receiver 2 is like Mike Evans, and like,
yeah.
I really don't want Baker Mayfield's wide receiver 2 as my wide receiver 2 in best ball, but it's like this counterintuitive thing where you think like, oh, those running backs are better on underdog and half PPR. But the fact that I'm going to get buried at wide receiver, and then like if you take those early running backs on underdog, you also like, what if you want an elite quarterback? What if you want an elite tight end? Now you're really freaking buried, dude. You take Mark Andrews with two of the, with CMC and Ramondre or something like that to start your draft. Like RIP to your wide receivers. Your wide receiver 1 is horrible. God forbid you take an elite quarterback then too. Versus on DraftKings, we know that we'll be able to make up that ground a little bit. So are you more willing, like we're talking about the elite quarterbacks and tight ends, are you also a little more willing to dabble in a little bit more early running back, even though it seems counterintuitive with the scoring?
So if you want my secret on underdog, what I like to do is I love to start with a wide receiver in the first round. And this is like just all encompassing, right? I like to go with my elite quarterback in the second round. And then I like to get my Pollard, Chubb, whatever I can get early in the third when you can still do it.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of my favorite build, is to go 1-1-1. And then I hammer wide receiver, grab Alexander Madison a lot of the times in the 6th or 7th round, hammer wide receiver again, take some detours here and there. But those are the builds that I really enjoy because you're able to still have your alpha wideout. You can still get a really solid number 2 and 3 in the 4th and 5th rounds. We're talking Drake London, Terry McLaurin. So you can start drafts with, say you start Tyreek, you grab Hurts or Mahomes, you grab Pollard or Chubb, you get Drake London to go with Terry McLaurin or some of that little pocket of wide receivers.
Mm-hmm.
And then your 4th, 5th, it gets a little rougher, but we're still getting guys like Tyler Lockett, Chris Godwin, as a 4 or a 5. And I feel relatively fine about that when we get there.
That makes sense. By the way, shout out to DraftKings for I will go to my grave that they saw us put out a draft board and it inspired them to do it. But shout out to them because I just wanted to mention that I know everybody knows that's watching this a pretty awesome draft board. So I would take CD here.
You would take CD? All right, we can do CD. And then
I would like to give us, like just take the wide receiver I like there. The Cowboys are set up for later if we want and kind of see what we do here. But this is where the 14, I'm completely open. I have like almost no preference.
Well, we can do whatever you want. We could just go ahead and do the classic CD Amon-Ra week 17
which I like better
stack.
on DraftKings too, by the way.
Right.
That little correlation I like better on let's just do that. Okay. Start there. They're both better full PPR players too. And you want to talk, we talked about the quarterback tight end correlation in full PPR. These high volume wide receivers have a pretty nice game stack correlation. That's right. We love the week 17 correlation. You know, it is going to be talked to death again for the rest of the summer. Yeah. But like one reason why it is super impactful is when there's a bunch of scoring, but that also generally means like a bunch of passing. Like there can be scoring and it's like Derrick Henry and he's grinding out, right? They scored 35 points and it grinds out the clock and Derrick Henry smashes, but nobody on the other side is like really racking up that many points. On DraftKings, it's like, if we get into the shootout and Dak and Goff are just throwing constantly on each side and you have the 30% target share players on both sides, that's when you get the 12 for 150, you know, and then pray you get multiple touchdowns on each side. This actually happened. Oh my gosh, it's been a while now, but was it Monday or Sunday Night Football? Like, was it like the first year in LA? And it was Goff against the Bucks back when Jameis was the quarterback of the Bucks. Mm-hmm. And it was like 52-49 or something like that. But it was like everybody had like 10 catches. Like they're just wrecked because both teams keep scoring and they both keep throwing. And like, the other team's throwing and scoring so we got to match this, right? We can't go 3 and out. We can't go run, incomplete punt. So both teams just keep throwing and throwing. And the next thing you know, Cooper Kupp's got 12 catches and Chris Godwin's got 12 catches. And like, that's another way to just like soak up that little bit of extra juice from those, correlations on DraftKings.
I just want to go through what I have set up on my overlay here, because I don't think it shows up when I hover over it for everybody. So my first percentages for my tourney, what I have for ownership there, then it's slate, and then it goes round 1, 2, and 3. And then my last 3 go with my projected ownership for quarterback 1, projected ownership for round 1 and round 2, which I'm going to clean up a little bit because I think that's a little harder to follow when people are watching. So I'll have it toned down a little bit when we draft again, but I just kind of wanted to throw out there.
I've played around with it a good clip for mine. I do a very, very, very similar, almost the same, but I do exposure in this tournament, and then exposure overall across all of my, so like in the DraftKings Millie, that'll be my first percentage, and then the second is I want to see what percentage I have this player across all of DraftKings. I find that to be especially helpful for me because I'm going into each and every tournament and actually a lot of the times treating them a little bit differently. Yeah. We don't have to get into all that, but I kind of do have separate strategies for each tournament. But then I do also then get into my ownership I have my ownership with my first round pick, my ownership with my second round pick, and then my ownership with my first quarterback. So kind of, very similar to you, but I just like, there's a million options now. Shout out to Hacker and shout out to everybody in the chat or in the Discord that's recommended different things. We're adding the projections into there. So you could see like literally what our like weekly point projections are for each player, which is a kind of a nice little fun way to find value as well throughout the course of the draft. But like, there's so many options. I've just found for me, that's been the most helpful way to do it.
Yeah. My thing is all about player combinations. So usually that's what I focus on. but that's for me.
So
we're gonna.
we don't have to take him right here, but I do just want to mention, and I see you have. Okay, so first of all, I would take Brees here.
You would take Brees.
I would take.
You're comfortable with him
Yes,
this season.
I'm much more comfortable now than I probably was before. Like I've talked to Karine about it, and there's been a bunch of news on him that seems pretty helpful. Plus, he's I think Aaron Rodgers like the backs that can catch passes, of which Brees is a really good one. We could talk about that in a second. I also really like Jahmyr Gibbs. I think he's a really fun one on DraftKings, but again, I'm open on this pick. I'll kind of defer to you since I took Brees.
So I'm fine with taking Jahmyr Gibbs here, but if we're talking about DK specific stuff, I am only drafting him on DraftKings.
Yeah,
like, and it's not even close. I'm not touching him on Underdog at all. Like, and I'm taking scoring system into account for that, right? We're talking half point PPR. I think that he's just not going to get a lot of the goal line work. So I'm looking at volume for pass catching and stuff with Jahmyr Gibbs. And he just feels like one of the worst picks on Underdog, if we're being completely honest, in my opinion.
I think that's totally.
I don't understand how people are smashing him where they're smashing him.
My only counter to that is just I like players we know are awesome.
Yeah.
And we know that the offense is going to be good. And so I agree with you. My guess on Jahmyr Gibbs, like I talked about the projections. I did the projections, and shout out Chris Jamino from Roto Grinders for helping me with those. And like on Underdog, Gibbs is very much does not project like whatever he is, the running back like 10 or something like that. Like he definitely does not project near where he goes. He's probably like multiple rounds overpriced relative to how he projects as a running back on Underdog, because within our projections, the projections agree exactly with what you just said. He's split. He's in a split backfield. He's not going to get a lot of the goal line work, and being the pass catching back, even though he's an amazing pass catching back, like there's only so much you can do on Underdog and half point PPR with no bonuses or whatever. Whereas on DraftKings, I just really love him. Like you almost treat him like you get this wide receiver as a running back, and he's also going to be an efficient runner. Like he's DeAndre Swift, but like better at everything, like literally better at everything, and more explosive probably than DeAndre Swift. And so on Underdog, my only counter is that like I'm just okay having this guy and being like, I don't know, maybe he will get a little more goal line work than we expect, and maybe he'll just be a freaking superstar. Right. And that's kind of like the only counter to him. But I agree, like from a general expectation, I think he's probably a little overpriced.
He's going third round now on Underdog, right? Like usually like
he's fallen a little bit actually.
Has he been falling?
I think his ADP is something like 44, 45.
Okay. It just, yeah. It's close. I don't hate him. Like it's not a guy that I hate. He feels very like poor man's Austin Eckler, where if he was Austin, like in the Austin Eckler role,
that's the like ceiling.
That's a ceiling, right? So I understand that, but he's just not right now. And there's the contingent upside and blah, 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 blah. But
yeah,
I don't want to pay for contingent upside in the third and fourth round, generally, is the way that I look at it. And like we said, he's going to be on the field. He's going to catch passes. I'm fine with him on DK. I think my exposure was 30-something% or something like that. So I don't know. There's certain guys that I'm doing that with.
He's a smash on DraftKings in my opinion. I just like, and you can look at this. You can start with CD and Amon-Ra. You still get Breece Hall, who I understand, Travis said, Breece is a little tough click. He obviously has the injury, and there is uncertainty around the Jets offense. Last week on Legendary Sickos, our Thursday show that I do, Pat Karine and I do a little crossover between Legendary Upside and Spike Week. We actually talked quite a bit about the Jets and how there's a lot of parallels to like last year's Broncos, which is very scary with the Jets. But even if Rodgers is regressing, even if the Jets aren't quite as good, like these pass catching running backs with Aaron Rodgers have just always been like, Aaron Jones is like not as good as Breece Hall as a football player. Aaron Jones is a good football player, but like he's not anything special. He's an above average running back, maybe, something like that. And he just smashes because Rodgers just checks it down all the time. He never throws incompletions. And then obviously the offense generally is pretty good. And so when you have someone as talented as Brees, kind of in this awkward area of the draft, I'm willing to kind of just click and pray the health is okay and assume the Jets are okay.
Gotcha. We are back on the clock here.
I'll let you go first because I keep taking the first guy.
Well, I think the obvious selection here is DJ Moore because there's a big cliff after wide receiver with him at this point.
What pick number is this?
That was pick 659.
There's the draft just giving us, right? That's what we talked about before. Like, there's really no reason DJ Moore should fall 10 picks past ADP, and then the draft just gives him to us.
So now we have questions on where we want to go here. Do we want to get an elite tight end on this build where we already have 2 running backs, or do we want to just maybe take another running back and shore up that with just 1, maybe 2 more running backs on this team? Take Pitts.
I like Pitts.
All right, we'll grab
also
Pitts.
More valuable on DraftKings, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. So, like, if your concerns, right, are Atlanta is not going to be an amazing offense and they're going to run. Well, Pitts is still generating a massive target share. He's also he's basically a wide receiver. I know that was a funny bit a little bit like last year and the year before, but really that's kind of how he's used. He's not like used like this inline. He's not George Kittle, as an example, right, who's like this. He's an offensive lineman who's also a freaking superstar wide receiver. Pitts is basically a wide receiver, and he gets used down the field. There's an awesome Twitter clip going around of all these times he's wide open down the field, and Mariota just like, did Mariota like play with a concussion all of last season or something? Because these throws were horrible. Now Ritter might not be any better, and that's of course the risk. But I think the PPR element and the bonus element, like he's very live to bonus and catch 6 or 7 passes. You may be a little concerned with the touchdowns, but I'm pretty into Kyle Pitts. He also plays DJ Moore in week 17. So it was kind of like checking a bunch of boxes, right? I really like him. I think he's even a little better fit for the DraftKings scoring. Elite tight end is something we had literally just discussed as a way to give ourselves an edge on DraftKings, because the draft is going to let us still get good wide receivers, right? We only have 3 wide receivers, 2 running backs. I would feel uncomfortable right now if we were on underdog and we took 2 running backs and a tight end through the first 3 rounds. I don't feel uncomfortable on DraftKings. And so I'm willing to take that elite tight end. Pitts also goes later on DraftKings than like Dallas Goedert's going before him. I like Goedert fine, but you talk about a guy who's better on underdog. Like Goedert, when is Goedert catching 8 passes in a game? Like,
right.
If AJ Brown goes down, I guess, but like he's not really a volume guy. He's just a touchdown guy because he's on the freaking Eagles.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, Goddard usually is a click for me on Jalen Hurts teams because it is hard to stack AJ Brown or Devonta Smith sometimes. So I am Pitts over Goddard, but I will click Goddard over Pitts on some Jalen Hurts teams occasionally, is all I'm doing there. So one thing that we can talk about is how we hyped up these elite quarterbacks, and we just decided not to draft one on this team. That seems very classic Spike Week, to talk about something and then not do it. So that's where we're at with this. The other thing I wanted to point out, what I've noticed a lot in these DraftKings drafts, and we're talking maybe a small sample size relative to the field, maybe 25 drafts. A lot of times the Jamar Chase and T. Higgins drafters are not getting Joe Burrow because people are trying to push him to the 4th, which I completely understand. I'd want to push him to the 4th at least anyways myself. But people are just grabbing unstacked Joe Burrow and really like messing up a lot of these Chase Higgins teams on DraftKings more than on Underdog. It's kind of comical to watch a lot of the time.
My dog's just destroyed a pillow in the other room. That's why I had to
Oh, no.
walk away. Also, definitely agree. It's very fitting. I do find that the turns and stuff being a little difficult with the elite quarterbacks. And so that's one thing. That's another thing to take into account. Like your draft position matters, obviously, but I also think that was why Pitts made a little bit more sense if we are trying to capitalize on, at least if we believe that these elite quarterbacks and elite tight ends have this kind of enhanced value on DraftKings, and the room's going to help us. Okay, we didn't get one of the elite quarterbacks. Let's lean into Pitts then.
I agree. All right, so we're going to be coming back up on the clock here in a second. We got 2 people in front of us. I think
wide receivers that are still available.
Yeah, so I mean, for me, it's Gabe Davis here, but I'm down for JSN if you prefer JSN.
No preference.
Let's just go with the playoff correlation with Gabe Davis. And then what I would be looking at is I kind of don't want Dak because I think we kind of want to try to, get the other quarterback from that game. So I'm curious if you have any thoughts on taking Deshaun Watson here if he stays on the board, which he doesn't. So it doesn't even matter.
Of course, doesn't. It would not be. I would not be upset if JSN falls back to us.
Yeah, I mean that's the easy smash here, right?
There we go.
So we just get both of them.
I mean, look at this. So isn't this you physically cannot get these players that we just drafted here together on Underdog? It will never happen. JSN goes in the 50s. He's fallen a little bit in the now, like maybe into the 60s. Gabe goes kind of around here, but he's also rising. Pitts goes higher than this. DJ Moore generally goes late 4th, early 5th, certainly not at the 5'11", right?
Yep.
Reese, you can never get at the 3'11". So like you're just never getting these combinations of players. So this is like, we can take that Pitts detour. We can take 2 early running backs, and we still have CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra St. Brown, DJ Moore, Gabe Davis, and JSN as our first 5 wide receivers. That's absurd. And we just let the room give that to us.
Yep. And that's another reason why I do like the elite QB builds on DraftKings, because you can give up that tight end, which is usually what I do, right? I'm usually not taking Kyle Pitts. So if on this team we took elite QB round 2 and just replace Kyle Pitts with one of these other wide receivers,
right,
say Deontay Johnson or something like that, we would just be missing Amon-Ra, but we'd still have Lamb, DJ Moore, Deontay Johnson, Gabe Davis, JSN. And you still feel great about that wide receiver room, right? So it's just so much easier to do on DraftKings than it is on Underdog.
Right. I mean, look at you scroll up just a tiny smidge. I just want to see the second and third round mainly. And so the concern is, I'm taking, you see the second round has 3 quarterbacks, right? Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, and Jalen Hurts, which is also kind of funny that they go in different I don't know if that's the ADP on DraftKings. I don't have it as memorized as I do Underdog, but Josh Allen goes 3rd of the elite quarterbacks and Patrick Mahomes goes 1st. We also project Patrick Mahomes the best out of all of those. Shout out to us. But you see some of the guys in the 3rd round, Devonta Smith, T. Higgins, Brees falling all the way to the 311. Even like Waddle is at the end of the second round. Some of these guys that like you couldn't get at those prices, like Devonta Smith being like probably the biggest one, a little bit of T. Higgins and Brees, that are tough guys to get on Underdog if you detour for the elite quarterback, but you can still get them on DraftKings. Plus, we just talked about capitalizing on sometimes the room gives you something even crazier, right? Like sometimes the Chubb will fall or Olave will fall, or we just saw the Waddle's at the 212 already. What's to say he couldn't fall to the 304 or whatever, like in a draft. So there's just so many ways to kind of manipulate it, and you have more ability to make these things back up. And I think this draft is like kind of showing you that with the elite quarterbacks.
Well, look at this team that started Tyreek Hill, Jalen Hurts, right? Then they go T. Higgins, Debo, if you like Debo, Kenneth Walker, Damian Pierce, but they still get Deontay Johnson. And I think I would keep him. This is like when I talk about people messing up their structure, I would be firing wide receivers here because I have Jalen Hurts and I don't need the Tua stack, right? And I definitely don't need James Cook on this team. But even
Once you
with
took Hurts, you
yeah,
kind of know you don't need Tua. Like it's
right.
not that you don't need or can't draft him, but it's like you're sort of muting the impact of Jalen Hurts in the second round.
Yes, especially when you go with the double running back too. All right, we are back on the clock here. Is there anyone that's jumping out
Just scroll
to
the list a little bit. We could do the Lions thing because it's probably not going to come back to us. There's JMO and Goff. If we wanted to just snap Goff, because he's just not going to come back to us.
right.
We're
We have to
picking at
take
the
him with one of
turn.
these two picks.
Let's do him. I'm just trying to look at. I was going to say Dylan's not bad. Charbonnet. I like Charbonnet, and there goes JMO. Charbonnet, A-Chain. I do not want Juju. That's about the only thing I'm passionate about.
Do you like Charbonnet or do you like A-Chain better?
Let's take A-Chain. He correlates into the first two playoff weeks.
Okay. He's getting some camp buzz too.
Right? Yeah. Everybody keeps talking about this Dalvin thing. And I'm like, why? Maybe I will end up wrong. But everybody keeps saying, like, oh, what if Dalvin ends in Miami? Why the fuck would Miami? They're certainly not trading for him on that contract.
They're definitely not trading for him.
This whole idea anyone's going to trade for like a below average running back to pay him the best running back is absurd. But they drafted A-Chain, who they clearly love. McDaniel was like, he wouldn't stop smiling when they were asking him about A-Chain at the draft, and they brought back their two reliable veterans. I mean, they even still have Myles Gaskin and Savon Ahmed on the roster. Now, I suspect they're both going to get cut, but there's no need for them to bring in Dalvin Cook. Like, what? It's kind of it's the James White tweet. What does Dalvin Cook do for this team exactly? Right. Like, I don't get it. So I'm still going to be drafting A-Chain and all three. I'm going to draft all three of the Dolphins running backs over my portfolio.
One thing I like to do is kind of just stare at some of these other teams when I'm doing these draft streams and kind of get into the head of some of these drafters and see what they're doing. So from the one spot, we see Jefferson, Waddle go. Then they go Ramondre, Hawkinson, Aaron Jones, Isaiah Pacheco. They come back to wide receiver with Burke, Sutton. And then they get Kirk Cousins to stack with Justin Jefferson. And I don't know if I like this type of build because I think you're trying to do robust RB, but I think you're doing it too late. I don't think you can do it with Stevenson, Jones, Pacheco personally. Now, if they keep firing at wide receiver and only get two more running backs late, probably okay, but it's just feels a little weak for me. I don't know where you stand.
I think the issue is mostly that I think specifically Aaron Jones and Pacheco as players are a little bit too weak versus I do think you can do like a third, fifth, sixth round running back into a robust build. Like if you took, I don't know, I don't see another potential.
I mean, I would prefer Pierce and Madison for this type of build.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely would have preferred Madison on this team. I do think that's another thing. I do think you can like kind of onslaught stack teams on DraftKings a little bit easier. Again, if Cousins especially Cousins is a good one. If he's getting there, it's certainly not with his legs. So if he has this huge game where Justin Jefferson is also having a huge game, like kind of everybody can eat. You know what I mean? Now, Madison and Jefferson and Hawkinson are all not going to go for 40, but you don't need them to all go for 40, right? You need Cousins to have this huge game, scores, throws for 400 yards or whatever and 4 or 5 touchdowns. And then if Madison just eats a little bit, the team scores 45 points. You just have the stone nuts. You know what I mean? I need to look up what did Fournette do in the week 17 game? Like he probably still had a good game, even though it was all I guess he was really splitting with Rachaad White, but I can look up between the two of them really quickly.
Well, while you're looking that up, that team, their next two picks went Russell Wilson and Zach Charbonnet, and that's where I think we start to get into trouble with some of these teams because now Burke, Sutton are your 3-4. Who the hell is going to be your 5th wide receiver at that point?
Now you just killed. There were too many detours away from wide receiver, especially in the range where we got a little lucky, but also we planned it out this way that we didn't take too many. We took a 3 detours, but we didn't take too many detours in the range where all the good wide receivers go. Right? Like he did. And now, like you said, even though he has Justin Jefferson and Jalen Waddle, his wide receiver room is going to be pretty weak. And he didn't gain an elite quarterback. You know, he gained an elite tight end, but he didn't even gain that good of running backs.
We're on the clock here. Is anyone jumping out to you on this particular list?
I'm really high on Eli Mitchell in general this season. Just as do we still only have?
We have 3 RBs.
Let's do him. Let's do him because that'll give us
Mitchell.
That'll give us 4. We can make this a 5 running back team.
Mm-hmm.
Gibbs, Brees. Who was the 4th guy or 3rd guy?
A-Chain.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I like this. Okay, this is good.
And I think I would probably go Mingo here. I think we have to go wide out.
We definitely need to go wide receiver. Mingo or even though we don't have Fields, we can tack Mooney on and just turn that into like a secondary, Bears double stack.
Do you have a preference?
I think Mooney would actually be my preference between these 2.
All right, let's do Mooney. All right, we'll take Mooney here. I think we had to go there with
definitely
with
needed to go wide receiver. I think that's an interesting one where deciding between those 2 guys. I don't think that Mooney really has any scenarios where he's like a breakout type player.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's a decent NFL player, and I think he can exceed his draft cost, of course, like if the Bears just throw more and get better on offense. Whereas Mingo, as this rookie in a really not just murky but shitty wide receiver room, like theoretically he could draw the most targets of any rookie wide receiver this season. So if we were in a spot where we were really chasing wide receiver point, like if I was the 101
mm-hmm.
and I was deciding between Mooney, and even with the Mooney correlation, if I was deciding between Mooney and Mingo, I would take Mingo for the wide receiver 1 because he needs a more of a home run swing. Not that we don't want to take a home run swing, but we're still in a pretty good spot with our wide receivers. And so I think we could side with the correlation aspect of it, if that makes sense.
Okay. I want to talk about another team here that I'm just kind of eyeballing. They go Jamar Chase, Nick Chubb, Devonta Smith, Jerry Jeudy, Terry McLaurin, Alexander Madison. Absolutely love that first
Amazing.
6 rounds.
6 picks. Beautiful.
Here's where they go after that. Darren Waller, Evan Ingram, Dak Prescott, Geno Smith, Rashad Penny, Raheem Mostert. And this is what I'm talking about with just absolutely burying like your structure that you're building. This double tight end click is terrible, in my opinion, like for this build. I think you need to go with 1, maybe 2 of your quarterbacks in these 4 picks. It's fine. You need 2 more wide receivers, and then you worry about running back. You just rely on Nick Chubb, you rely on Alexander Madison, and then you start taking some more running backs. But I think you need 6 wide receivers on this build, like early, and tack it on a 7th if you want to late with 20 rounds.
Again, I don't hate either Waller or Ingram. And mm-hmm. I like Dak and Geno just fine. But do they even have stacks with Dak and Geno? No, right?
No.
So no you stacks. Just and there was no real sense in both Waller and Ingram. It was just like it was like you took those 6 picks shots. No, sorry to whoever is in the 104, but you had this amazing first 6, and it was like you felt so good about that first 6. It's like my running backs and wide receivers are set. Now I'm just gonna I don't care because I love these first 6 picks so much. I can double tap tight end, and I have the luxury to double tap tight end and double tap quarterback, but you don't. You have to draft 20 players and you don't like Waller, and then like wide receiver would have been perfectly fine right there, right? And then maybe then you do come back to Dak. I don't really get the Dak Geno double tap when you don't have any Cowboys or Seahawks. I think that's also part of the problem. But it's like if you just took one of those tight ends and one of those quarterbacks and you sprinkled in wide receivers in there, and then you still took Penny and Mostert, like you'd be fine. You'd be totally fine. And like so like there, why would you not take Gallup? Why would you not take out like these are just little things? But like if you're gonna do the Dak Geno thing, like now let's be smart about it, right? Okay, we did that, and like I took Waller, like okay, let's take Daniel Jones instead of one of those guys. Like there's just a lot of little small things I think that were that team would probably like to have back.
Yeah, and shout out to getting Jamar Chase in the 4 spot. Like imagine if we got the 4 spot and we got to take Jamar Chase.
Seriously.
Oh man, like and I'm not shitting on that team. I love the way it started.
Devonta Smith at the 304. Judy is a good pick there. McLaurin at the 504. Madison, like you said, is a smash. Like just got a beautiful start, and then I think panicked a little bit at tight end and quarterback.
I concur. We are going to be coming back on the clock here. Is there anybody jumping out to you? We got a 1-4-6-1 build currently. Do you have any interest in Stafford or Pickett?
Not really. We don't have any Steelers, do we?
Do we want to grab Jaylen Warren as our 5th RB?
Yeah, let's just close out running back with Warren because I really like Warren. When in doubt, let's take this guy. He still fits the structure, right? We're not doing anything crazy.
Week 17 correlation as well with Seattle.
With JSN and oh no, we didn't take Charbonnet, right? We took A-Chain.
We took A-Chain, but we still have that, that week 17 stack.
Pick it goes anyway. I don't think there's probably not a quarterback here, but we should think about wide receivers that could set up a quarterback. I think we're done at running back. We got Pitts. So go to wide receiver and see if there's anybody. Chark, Curtis Samuel.
Well, do you want it? Well, we would have to take Bryce Young now.
Not really.
We have 6 seconds.
You can take him though.
Do you want to take him or do you want to take?
Let's take Bryce.
Okay. All right. We took Bryce.
Because we do have backdoors. We got Hayden Hurst in our pocket. We got Chark. Yep. We got not Thielen or but if we really want to get in our bag and a Shy Smith or a Visca or something like that, it's still there. But Hurst, I would like Hurst. So maybe we would need to put Hurst in the queue or just keep him at the top of our minds.
Yeah, we'll keep him at the top of our minds. We can get him at these next 2 picks if we want to get him for sure. Hubbard would have been like I like Jaylen Warren better. Like he's a tier up for me. But if Warren wasn't there, grabbing Chuba with Bryce Young and then getting Hayden Hurst wouldn't have been a terrible like backdoor oh shit stack, which we need to trademark, by the way.
Absolutely.
So throw that out there. Do we want to go through another one of these teams as we're
let's see. I want to see what the guy that started Eckler, Mahomes, just because obviously no wide receivers through 2 rounds and also really took some detours. So I want to see how that one turned out.
So they went Eckler, Mahomes, Calvin Ridley, Amari Cooper, George Kittle, Trevor Lawrence, Rashad White, David Montgomery, Zay Flowers, Alan Lazard, Tyler Boyd, Donta Foreman, Laporta, Everett. So this again, it starts off with a way that I would be fine with through the first 5.
Through 5 is totally fine.
Yeah, you go through 5. You cannot go tight end, second quarterback, right? You just can't do that. And then you definitely can't follow it up with 2 running backs. I like Rashad White. David Montgomery's fine. Not on this team. Because now you're doing Calvin Ridley, Amari Cooper, Zay Flowers, Lazard, Boyd. That wide receiver room's grossed. You have Eckler, and you're hoping to juggle Rashad White and Montgomery. You have no strength other than at QB and theoretically tight end here. So yeah, your pole positions are strong, but you've just mixed in too much garbage too early. Like, and garbage in relative terms, you know what I mean? Like
Yep.
Like I said, I still like Rashad White. I like Zay Flowers, Lazard, but I like Zay Flowers as a fifth wide receiver, right? Like
Not a third.
not a third. I like Lazard as a fifth wide receiver. I like Boyd as a fifth or sixth wide receiver. Where we're just mixing in. You're way too reliant on Amari Cooper and Calvin Ridley on this team, and then for some reason you double tap tight end with Laporta and Everett. And what the hell does Donta Foreman do for this particular team? Why are we not going wide receiver? Why are we not pushing that running back spot? Because if you are building like this, you need to be getting like 9 or 10 wide receivers. I've done some builds similar to this, but it's been understanding that I have 2 alpha wideouts. Usually I get one of them in the first round, right? So it would usually be with like a Diggs or a Brown, and then maybe a Calvin Ridley or something. But then I'm just mixing in a ton of wide receivers because I'm so strong everywhere else. And I think this is our biggest strength on DraftKings is watching people just ruin whatever structure they start with because they don't know and they're learning. Everybody's learning, right? And it's not making fun of them or anything like that because you have to learn. You have to fail to understand what you're doing wrong in best ball and look at your teams and understand what structures you're messing up. But that's our edge right now on this is we understand structure, right? If you're coming over to Spike Week, we are helping you understand it. You just put out a great video in our YouTube channel that explains like what each structure is. I highly suggest anyone that's new to best ball go watch that or even just watch it to brush up. But that's our edge right now, more so than the falling ADP and everything. It's understanding how to draft more, and it's way more beneficial here than it is elsewhere. We are on the clock again.
Where's Hurst? I just want to make sure we don't get locked out of the stack. Oh yeah, we're gonna have to take him before, so that's good.
Yeah.
Jaden Reed, Curtis Samuel, Mechie, Renfro. Any of those wide receivers is the other guy here, I think.
You want to grab Samuel because of the 16 and 17 since we're breaking ties?
Yeah. I'm just looking. Yeah. Yes. Jaden Reed. Now we take Hurst. Now let's take Hurst.
Yeah. And now we'll take Hurst.
Beautiful.
And we get what we want. Let's look at our playoff matchups real quick. So we have a Detroit Dallas stack with Goff, Gibbs, Amon-Ra with CeeDee Lamb as the bring back. We have DJ Moore, Darnell Mooney with Kyle Pitts as a bring back. We have the one-offs with Jaylen Warren and JSN. And we have Elijah Mitchell and Curtis Samuel as another week 17 correlation. So not going out of our way for week 17 stuff, broke a couple ties because of it. And we're setting our team up exactly how we like it. And shout out to the tool because, yeah, we know week 17 matchups. I still don't know all of them offhand, but I don't know the week 15 or 16 matchups. So seeing some of those, it definitely helps out. It makes me break ties that way.
A couple of good questions in the chat first. This is in the Millie, right? The $10 Millie. And then Olaf asks, with 20 rounds, are we always taking 3 quarterbacks and 3 tight ends? And definitely not always. So one thing I do like to think about with the 3 quarterbacks and 3 tight ends is we actually have a team here that I don't want to take 3 tight ends with Pitts, but I would be comfortable with a third quarterback.
Yes.
We're set up well for Sam Howell. Actually, he's probably the best third
been
quarterback
for a while.
Has he really?
He went in the 15th round. Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
God damn. I need to I don't know what I need to do. I'm so used to my 17th, 18th round Sam Howell on underdog. But anyway, if he would have been something that we could have done there, like if it came right, if we were in a different spot where we didn't need Hayden Hurst, like if we took Mingo earlier, we could have double tapped if Howell came back to us. We could have double tapped Howell, Samuel there for a third quarterback. You definitely don't always want to take that though. And I think that's actually one potential edge that you can get on DraftKings. And you mentioned like structure and draft strategies and stuff. I think every like casual player, you get to the end of the drafts and like there's a starting quarterback or a starting tight end back there. And so it does make sense to use that to our advantage. But I think people do it on like every team, no matter what quarterbacks they drafted, no matter what tight ends they drafted. And like if that third quarterback or that third tight end is not going to play a real big factor, even with 20 rounds, when you have like a superstar quarterback or tight end. And you also have to think about what do you win and when you win type of a situation. And if you have Travis Kelce, that third tight end is not only not helping you on your Travis Kelce team, but you're probably weaker at running back or wide receiver or something like that than your opponents are. So you need that extra lottery ticket. You need that extra home run swing at those other positions. So I think a lot of the time our competition on DraftKings drafts way too many 3 quarterback and 3 tight end teams because they just say, oh, look, I have those extra picks. I'm just going to use it on the onesie positions. And sometimes you should, but I think people default to it too much. And so like to your question, not always. I would not always draft those positions. And for me personally, I'm going to lean away from it a little bit more solely because I know everybody else like uses that as their crutch.
Yeah. And after our next 2 picks, we're going to take a look at this team that drafted from the 2 hole because it's interesting. And just to go on about that point you're making, for me, I try to have like a demarcation point of where I think I'm comfortable with a 2 or 3 quarterback build. So Lawrence and we'll talk about this in a second. We are
Downs makes some sense here. Slot receiver, a little bit of correlation in the playoffs. We need wide receivers. Shakir, I don't mind either.
Let's grab Downs. All right, so we are kind of screwed at quarterback.
Third quarterback is probably just not an option for us on this team.
Right, because everybody went very early in this draft. So we're probably stuck with a 2 quarterback build, unfortunately.
That's okay.
Is anybody else jumping out to you on this team?
Shakir. I think we want to go wide receiver here, probably. Yeah, probably Shakir. Let's take Shakir.
All right,
I like, he's on an elite offense. I am not going to sit here and pound the table for Khalil Shakir, over the course of the season. We do have Gabe Davis on this team. So it sets us, it's not like we don't have Patriots. So we're not getting like a week 17 correlation, but it's kind of similar. You can stack up these little secondary stacks, right? So over the course of the entire season, even in week 17, whether we have a Patriot or don't have a Patriot is not really always the point. You don't have to have that. But like, we just set ourselves at like, what if something happens to Stephon Diggs, right? These are like tiny little things we can do. We have Gabe and we have Khalil Shakir. If the Bills just are awesome, we have 2 players and the Bills are probably going to be pretty awesome on offense, spoiler alert. And then you have you just set yourself up for a bunch of different paths to success. And I also think drafting some of these young guys where we're pretty strong at wide receiver, but not like we're not blowing away the field by any stretch at wide receiver. So getting a little juice right with a rookie and Downs and then just betting on the Bills can help us maybe capture some juice.
Correct. The 2 spot drafted CMC, Chris Olave, Josh Jacobs, Drake London, Miles Sanders, Brandon Ayuk, Cam Akers. So they alternate running back, wide receiver all the way to Cam Akers, then Mike Thomas. Then they go Anthony Richardson. They go Williams in New Orleans, Adam Thielen, Derek Carr, Jonathan Mingo. Then they double tap tight end with Johnson for the stack. They grab Michael Mayer to stack with Garoppolo, who they take next.
Interesting.
And then they take Desmond Ridder as a 4th quarterback.
See, that's who screwed us. That guy. We could have used Ridder as the 3rd quarterback on this team to go with Pitts.
And then they grab a 3rd tight end with Ferguson, which they do need a 3rd tight end on this team.
Mm-hmm.
But the 4 QBs, it blows my mind because if you're taking Richardson, I think you can go with a 3 QB build with him. No problem. Definitely fine. Why are we going 4? I don't understand the 4 QB build.
Richardson can go either way. I've heard people say, I I don't think you should have a rule. There's almost never a situation where you should have a rule with about anything and any player.
Right.
But Richardson, I can see absolutely you can draft a 3-quarterback team with him, and you could draft a 2-quarterback team with him. You can say, right, there's some people that will say, well, if I'm drafting him at this price, given kind of the uncertainty, I'm going to say, okay, he's a hit, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to treat him more like an elite quarterback. And I think that's fine, but also don't think you have to do that. But to your point, Ritter, I just don't think you need to it was actually kind of a fine team. The late tight end thing came together well with Stacks. And Jimmy G, Carr, Richardson is fine. I mean, I personally hate Jimmy G, but like Richardson, Carr, Jimmy G is fine. It was just, again, one little thing where like, what does Desmond Ritter like? If Desmond Ritter is helping you, then these other quarterbacks probably failed, or you I just don't know if you have enough firepower at the other positions to kind of do that. You just need, and it seems like these late round guys suck at these other positions, but that doesn't mean that we should just default to quarterback. I think we can take another running back on this team, by the way.
Yeah, we can definitely now that we're locked out at QB.
Yep.
Do you want to go Zach Evans? Is there another one you want to look at here?
Let's take a wide receiver really quick first, and then because I haven't looked at the running back
Slayton.
list. I'm down with Slayton. Yeah.
All right, so we'll grab Slayton,
and let's look at running back.
All right, relax, DraftKings. We could do Eric Gray. We could do Malik Davis.
Malik Davis makes a ton of sense on this team.
Yeah, Malik Davis feels right for this team.
No Pollard. Obviously, we have a big bet on that game, and he correlates in every single week of the playoffs.
Yep. All right, so let's run through our team real quick. We went CeeDee Lamb, Amon-Ra, Breece Hall, Jahmyr Gibbs, DJ Moore, Kyle Pitts, Gabe Davis, JSN, Jared Goff, A-Chain, Elijah Mitchell, Mooney, Jalen Warren, Bryce Young, Curtis Samuel, Hayden Hurst, Josh Downs, Khalil Shakur, Darius Slayton, and Malik Davis. And we got a bunch of playoff correlation on this team. So we got our Detroit-Dallas stack, which is Goff, Jahmyr Gibbs, Amon-Ra with Malik Davis and CeeDee Lamb bringbacks in the dome, like that one.
That's beautiful.
Atlanta at Chicago, we get more Darnell Mooney, no Justin Fields, but that's fine. We bring Kyle Pitts for the comeback. So the 12 plays that they run in this game, we're hoping that 5 of them are touchdowns to these 3 players. We got Pittsburgh at Seattle. We got Jalen Warren versus JSN. And then we get Elijah Mitchell, Curtis Samuel for another little mini correlation. We also have some team correlation, right? We have the Bryce Young, Hayden Hurst stack as well. We have a Gabe Davis, Khalil Shakur stack, sort of like we do with Chicago, with no bring back. We almost were able to get like a Patriots bring back on that one, but even Mac Jones went a little bit earlier than we wanted to. And that would have been one, if we could have got Mac Jones, I might have said we obviously don't need to take Darius Slayton on this team. We wouldn't have taken Malik Davis, and we could have done a 4th game stack there.
Yep.
Is something I would have done, and done a 3 tight end build. That would have been one of the few situations I would have done it with this team. Overall, what are your thoughts?
It's a really, really good team where obviously we need we need Bryce to be pretty good, and we need Goff to be pretty good. Quarterback is where we're hurting, but everything else is like, you can't dominate every single position in a draft. And I think that's what, and at some of the drafters that we went through here, where they had even like really, really good starts, they tried to dominate every single position. And then you end up not dominating any of the positions. We're not going to dominate quarterback, even though we wanted to. Our goal in this, when we came into this draft, was to do it, but the draft didn't let us. But so then we built a team that allows us to potentially dominate all other 3 positions. And we sided with all this different correlation, both from the playoff aspect and right, Shakir, Bryce, and Hurst. Those kind of picks were just like team correlations.
Yep.
And the other thing I just want to say is, you kind of mentioned like the late round thing that is like super duper important, where people will say, right, like, like I get to the 19th and 20th round, what position do I need? And sometimes, right, you drafted a 0 running back team. Sometimes you do just need to draft a running back at that spot. But like our team, honestly, we could have taken any position. in the 19th and 20th rounds. And so you make that decision based on the players that make the most sense. So like we took Malik Davis, made the most sense for us from who was on the board with the team that we drafted. But there could have been a situation where, like you said, actually taking 3 quarterbacks and 3 tight ends and doing Mac Jones and Hunter Henry or something like that made more sense. And so people would say, well, what about the structure? It's like when you get to the 19th and 20th round, it's not that structure doesn't matter, because it does, but it's one thing that matters. And if you can get right, if we would have got Mac Jones and Hunter Henry, this team would have been just as good, maybe even better. Who knows? But you're deciding between like the positional thing in the 19th and 20th round. I think people get a little too rigid there too. And they say like, oh, this team has to have a wide receiver, right? It's like, if the best pick's a running back, right? Like if Malik Davis was the best pick on your team, just draft him. It's okay. It's okay to like take one more running back than you thought you absolutely had to take on that team, if that pick is the one that makes the most sense when you get on the clock.
Well, understanding your flexibility, right? We knew we wanted a third quarterback, but we got locked out. So maybe a takeaway for us in this draft is to be cognizant of how fast quarterbacks are going. We saw where what's his name, Sam Howell went in the 15th round, and just understanding that like if we see something like that, put the antennas up to make sure that the next round we're looking at the QB position and seeing if we have to go there. I don't think it was like a nail in the coffin to kill our team or anything, but that opened the door for us to have that flexibility with the 19th and 20th round. Do we want to look at any of these other teams that drafted here and kind of go through how they laid out their structure? Maybe one or two more.
No, we went through like half the teams. We don't got to shit on everybody that's in the draft.
I mean, that wasn't the point. It's I guess that is what we kind of did. That wasn't what I was trying to do.
I know.
I was trying to just show like where our edges are on some of these structures and like that people are building. And I think when we look at teams that are building structures incorrectly, it helps jot our mind to be like, oh, I remember seeing that mistake when I watched this draft, and I don't want to make that mistake next time. I don't want to grab this running back in this round. But so kind of go through that on some of our other draft streams as well when we're drafting, to just ensure that like we see, or I like to highlight teams that are drafting really well too.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I see a team that's doing a draft and I really, really like it, I try to point out like, I like this team. I like this AJ Brown team that we see here. Right. We'll go through it. I know you said no, but we're going to go through this AJ Brown team. It's AJ Brown, Tony Pollard, Lamar Jackson, D Hop, J.K. Dobbins, Kadarius Toney, Jahan Dotson, Rashad Bateman, Brian Robinson, Dalton Kincaid, Rashee Rice, Sky Moore, Irv Smith, Jeff Wilson, Sam Howell, Jaden Reed, Isaiah Likely, Tyson Chandler,
Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Really well done. Yes, this is a really well done team.
And we understand why they went with Sam Howell so early,
What's
right?
the username? I would like to. Can we swap equity? We'll give him 50% of that if we can get 50%. Oh, that's Moxie. Moxie in the Discord. No wonder. He's a sharp, really, really good team. Really, really good team.
Yep. So it gets the Lamar Jackson stacks. He does reach a little bit on Howell just to get that second QB so he doesn't get locked out. I like that. He builds his team. He takes the double shot at the Kansas City wide receivers. He might have a triple shot with Hopkins, although I have an inkling he's going back to Houston. The running backs are set up perfectly with Pollard and J.K. Dobbins waiting for Brian Robinson in the 9th round. Like, do I like Dalton Kincaid? No, but if you do, fine. Like, he waits till the 10th round to get his tight end. Still gets a 2.693 build that looks really good on paper, and that's how you
correlations. Yeah, it's structured really well around Pollard and AJ Brown, and never got locked out really of wide receiver, despite the fact that he took a 2nd round running back, a 3rd round quarterback, and another 5th round running back. Right, still like Bateman is almost kind of that cutoff guy, and he still got to Bateman as his wide receiver 5. Right,
which is a stack with Lamar. Like, it's so good.
It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. Got all these perfect correlations. Has like a mega, so he has this mega chief stack, but with Lamar, right? And so it's like if Lamar's going off, it doesn't really matter that Mahomes is going off, but you can still benefit from Mahomes going off by having all of his weapons right alongside your Ravens stack. It's a really well done team.
Yeah, great team. And he didn't take Hurts early, which he could have done. He could have done AJ Brown and Hurts, but then that would have really pushed this running back. So I just really like this team. I think it's very well constructed. And seeing that as well, not just seeing the bad teams, but seeing what the good teams are doing and how they're drafting and how it all makes sense. This team, this is the perfect example of every pick making sense on a team. So
100%. 100%.
And that's pretty much going to do it for me. Do you have any closing thoughts?
No, we will be back tomorrow night. I don't think we've settled on what we're going to discuss, but be on the lookout for that. Rob mentioned the latest video in our How to Win at Best Ball series, which was around roster construction. The first video was about the rules and the scoring and advanced structures and playoff versus cumulative and all that fun stuff. And then the draft was the second part, which we talked actually a lot about at the beginning of this episode in how to kind of handle different draft rooms. And then, of course, roster construction. There will be 2 more parts to that series. I've had a lot of fun. I'm trying to crank those out, maybe even both of them tomorrow. So be on the lookout for those. And then been 5 episodes deep into our legendary Sickos show with myself and Pat Carrain. And we are most notably going maybe a little too long on some of those episodes, but that's because the discussion has been really, really good. And I love talking to Pat. And this is not me at all trying to like toot my own horn or frankly toot our own horn, but I think the discussion is really interesting, which is a lot of what happens with Rob and I. But we're not like, there's no like preaching, or there's neither one of us are coming to the table and being like, I have all the answers, but we're kind of talking through different ideas, strategies, concepts. We talked through most recently some like uncertain situations and player combinations and ownership. And we end up kind of bouncing ideas off of each other and fleshing out our thoughts kind of live on the air. And those have been getting a shout out to everybody for the comments and the feedback and everything. It's really much appreciated. But those have been getting pretty strong reviews from anybody. And that will be the next show, of course, will be this Thursday. So that's what we got coming up here.
Bonus live show on Thursday that Erik doesn't even know about, but I'll be doing a draft Thursday afternoon with Kyle Dvorak. So he'll be on with me Thursday afternoon for a live draft. And everything else, just pumping out a lot of stuff. And it's time, everyone. It's June. We're going.
It is. Yeah. We are definitely into the hot best ball summer, as you can tell. Lots and lots of content coming here at Spike Week. But we'll be back tomorrow. Rob and I and these crazy sicko dogs that are destroying. They can't run around, so now they're destroying the things around my office. But we will see you guys tomorrow. Have a good night. Peace.
Woo! Those were some spicy takes. Want to stay up to date with all of the other spicy takes we're going to have over here at Spike Week? Why don't you press that subscribe button below? You turn notifications on, we draft a team, boom, you know about it. We have another spicy take, boom, you know about it. You can be there, you can draft with us. You want to stay up to date? That's how you do it. All right, we'll catch you later next time here at Spike Week.